Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session on what AI cannot replace in evaluation, the role of human judgment. This is session two of our three-part series exploring the use of AI in evaluation. Much of the conversation AI in evaluation has focused on efficiency, faster coding, reporting. But evaluation is not only technical, it is deeply human. Good evaluation requires context, nuance, trust, ethical judgment, and meaningful engagement with people and communities. As AI becomes more integrated into evaluation practice, an important question emerges. What part of evaluation fundamentally still require human judgment? And with that, I'm very happy to welcome our speakers today. First, we have Ms. Aditi Chatterjee. Aditi is an independent research and MEL specialist who enables development sector stakeholders to use data for strategic decision making in their organizations and programs. This is on the interconnected themes of decent work, responsible supply chains, business, and human rights, as well as anti trafficking, with extensive experience spanning South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Africa. Her work strongly emphasizes inclusive evidence systems, ensuring that research and evaluation the realities of the people most affected by the problems that we are trying to solve. Next, we have Mr. Rahul Shah. Rahul is an independent consultant with extensive experience working with nonprofits and social enterprises across sectors and geographies around the globe. His perspectives focus on strategy, institutional building, and change management to help enable organizational transformation. Next, we have Ms. Sharon Weir, co founder at Impact. She works extensively on impact assessments, research studies, and utilization focused evaluation across sectors, including education, health, and livelihoods. Her work focuses on qualitative inquiry, interpretation, field realities, and how evidence is translated into meaningful decision making. Finally, we have Ms. Payal Mulchandani, also co founder at Fourth Wheel Social Impact. Payal works at the intersection of research systems, technology, operational processes, partnerships, and evaluation practice. She brings practical perspective on how organizations are adopting AI tools while balancing quality, contextual understanding, and client expectations. With that, we can dive straight into the first round of questions for our panel today. First up, my question is for Payal. While in day-to-day evaluation workflows like survey design or pilot reviews, where have you found AI to be most useful, and where does human contextual understanding still become indispensable?
Hi everyone. Thanks, Aivya, for the question. Going to sort of go a little deeper into start with what I really do day to day. Work with at the intersection of a lot of different workflows, implementation. I sort of overlook a lot of my team's work on the operational side of things. Like how Ivya said, building survey forms, looking at pilot data, reviewing data as it comes in, parts of analysis. So I have been testing multiple AI tools in the last year, from starting as basic as chat on AI to now sort of actually getting outputs on Excel, Word, making dashboards. So, it's in the last year, AI also has jumped a lot. And I think my skills and my understanding has also jumped a lot in this process. I'll take two specific examples where I have found it very useful. One is specifically building surveys, which most of us sort of do for all our data collection processes. At Fourth Wheel, we've been using Survey CTO now for, I don't know, 8-10 years, since we moved from pen and paper to using tech to, do data collection. We've been using Survey CTO for that. But sort of, one part is using the online structure the CTO has, and then the backend Excel, which most of these Kobo, anything else you use, they all have like a coding sheet on Excel, which someone has to, code through, find 100 bugs when you are testing, and then figure it out. So this is where, it really reduces a lot of time. But For example, if we are building an education tool for teachers, students, sort of multiple stakeholders in an education project, before the CTO tool that we make, I think one of the most important things is that human judgment needs to go in first. Our team, our partners need to decide, who we are really talking to, what indicators are relevant to which stakeholder, who will be able to talk about what aspect of the program, how should we make the sequence which of questions which is not intrusive, and sort of which language are they speaking, are there any dialects possible that that could come in. So all these judgment has to be made by the program team and by the evaluation team. AI can't make that judgment for us. Where AI does help is when you have all these sort of questions marked, understandings built, what questions to skip at what point in time. The AI can help you make the form almost 40-50%. The structure could be ready, but all of these aspects, until the team doesn't sort of work, it's not going to sort of come in. What you'll get is something which will break down on your first day of pilot. It's not going to sort of work in the field. So that human judgment is sort of very, very important as you go. The other part definitely should look what I've been using it on is pilot data review. So whenever our team sort of goes for data collection, we usually have 3 days of training, pilot processes to to bring in how the data is coming. So once we see the data for the first few days, obviously since there are certain patterns, you will see certain enumerators responding to certain questions in a specific way, skipping certain things. There'll be you could definitely point out that maybe this person has not understood this question, or maybe we've not asked the question in a correct way, or you found something on the ground which was different. Once with the human judgment, when you are able to sort of identify these questions have this pattern, you can actually work with the AI, tell what patterns are emerging, and on day 3, day 4, as more data sort of comes in, it will already flag these things, and it can give individual sort of recommendations to each enumerator on where they are sort of lagging. It can also check how long have they spent on a particular say consent time, how long have they spent on a certain question, and why they should sort of spend more time on. So all these text audit that we do on a CTO platform is sort of sort of looked at and given sort of flags to that you just sort of skip through the consent say in 10 seconds, which is not how it should be. So all of these specific output enumerator wise is where sort of it comes in. Just to sort of also bring in beyond all the evaluation, one wanted to sort of add a more personal experience where I've had where this human judgment sort of comes in. I was sort of moving my AI memory from ChatGPT to Claude. So ChatGPT had been using a lot, so it builds a memory of what you've been feeding into, who you are, what you do, how you write. It becomes sort of a document, like a markdown file, which you can download the memory and move it to another platform. So when I was downloading this to move it to another sort of AI platform, one of the things it said, about like introducing me to the other platform was, okay, this is Payal. She is the co-founder of Fourth Wheel. And the second thing it said that, I am a thalassemia minor, which was from a blood test I had uploaded, say months, I don't know, years, couple of years back. And that was literally the second thing that the AI remembered about me from one blood test. So just wanted to put this that, AI is making weightage calls every day. It's deciding, what is important, what is not, whose response matters, what matters about a person. So we definitely need humans deciding, what should and shouldn't be there. It can help us sort of look at things, but how to prioritize, how to look at things is, no one else is asking these questions. So we need to sort of bring and, ask AI those questions. So yeah, this is sort of a mix of, both work-wise and also just some personal experiences of what I've had with AI as well.
That's very interesting to hear, Payal. And I think since you mentioned the role of AI and how it may not be the best tool, especially when you're working on field, I would like to invite Aditi and ask her how her experience has been like working with vulnerable communities, and how has it shown you that AI can support evaluation processes but cannot replace lived experience and human ethical judgment.
Thanks, Aivya. I do a lot of work with the anti-trafficking sector, which means, people who've been trafficked into sex work, into labor situations, unsafe labor situations. And for the purpose of answering your question today, I'll be using some examples from the sector itself. So when we worked with vulnerable populations, one of the things that comes across most is that we currently do not always use the judgment of people with lived experience, or PWLE as an acronym. What that means is a lot of the decisions that we depend on AI for in evaluation process are actually gleaned from sources that do not have inputs from people with lived experience. Largely AI will scrape data and reports that are in majority languages like English. It will scrape things from institutional backgrounds, academic white papers, UNs, etc. And then weigh them more. So very much like Payal said about, what's it weighing? Is it the thalassemia minor or the co-founder? So that weightage is then given by AI to something that's more accredited. And similarly, it's basically giving more weightage to things that are documented. So in all of these three categories, people with lived experience whose problems we're trying to solve, their voice does not always come through because their voices might actually be in local languages. They may not be documented, and they might also not always be associated with an academic source or like a white paper. So what happens in these kinds of cases is we end up not giving enough importance to people with lived experience, even though theirs is the exact problem we're trying to solve through our research and evaluation. And I would probably point to three specific stages in the evaluation process where this happens more often than not. Firstly, in defining the questions, the research and evaluation questions that we're asking. So what are we asking? Which means that we may actually do a literature review, find the research gaps, and then say that, oh, this is an evaluation question or a research question that's not being understood well, and we need to commission a research or evaluation to actually understand this. What happens here is that, again, we're scraping literature, we're scraping research gaps that have not been informed by people with lived experience. And if I were to use an example, recently ILO launched a global survey where they wanted to set the research agenda for the anti-trafficking field for the coming 3 to 5 years. And they could have easily done this with AI, right? Like they could have just asked AI all the, literature review focused AI tools. They could have asked it to just help us point to the research gaps. But what they did instead was they floated it out very democratically to all the people who could access this, and they got multiple responses from people who had actually got lived experience of forced labor or trafficking, and they then weighed in on what the actual research priority should be, which is really important because their voices would not have come up in a simple literature review or research gap map. Second stage is what we do with data tools. So it's not just what we are asking, but it's also about how we are asking things. So while we develop data tools, AI can obviously give us an excellent first draft, right? But what we ask, language is not neutral. So what we ask carries a lot of weight in re-traumatization situations when we're dealing with vulnerable populations. It's about the ethics of how you're portraying them when you're even asking a question. Again, using a trafficking example, in our field, the word victim was used a lot till some time back. But in consultations with people who had lived experience of trafficking, what we realized is we need to move terminology from victim to survivors because that's more empowering. People don't want to be called victims. So this could not have come from AI because this is such nuanced and contextual understanding that you cannot possibly feed this into AI and expect them to spit it out. So here, consultations with PWLEs is what actually led to this discovery, and the terminology has changed accordingly. So now when we frame our data tools, we keep this terminology in mind. The third place is in an evaluation cycle where I think AI can help, but the judgment from people is more important, is in actually interpreting and validating the data that's come to us. And what do we then do about it? Because evaluation without an actionable is just a report that's sitting without being read, right? So In this kind of a scenario, I think, again, using an anti-trafficking example, we know the literature tells us, when we scrape the literature with AI, the literature tells us that legal support, prosecutions, and prosecution of perpetrators, and mental health counseling is something that really helps people with lived experience of trafficking. But when we've actually spoken to people on the ground, specifically in certain communities and geographies, what we understood is that they want interventions that give them agency, because being trafficked takes away complete agency from you. So they actually want interventions that can help them rebuild that agency. So what we understood is, yes, you can collect the data, it can help you summarize what people are saying, but if that data said that people want agency interventions versus, say, legal support interventions, because the existing literature already speaks so much about legal support, AI is going to weigh legal support as more important than the agency intervention, right? So it's just about what goes in and what comes out into an AI bot. So I think these are the kinds of areas in evaluation where AI can support, but human judgment cannot be replaced because of the value of lived experience in them.
Thank you so much, Aditi, for pointing out how AI can shape how people are represented and how it becomes a crucial point when you're talking about inclusivity. With that, I also think when we are talking about the output of the data and how it's being analyzed, those nuances become equally important. And I think that's where I would like Sharon to answer our next question. Uh, I think with AI increasingly being used for qualitative analysis, how do you see the balance between automated synthesis and genuine human interpretation in evaluation work?
Thanks, Aivya, and very good morning, afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining. Love to see so many people are interested, not just in the efficiency of AI, because we all know that we have answers to that. But I think when it comes to human judgment, I want to talk about two things. One is to kind of set the tone that evaluation is not about generating insights. Evaluation is about making decisions. And AI cannot make decisions. AI cannot make choices for us. AI, that's where human judgment is needed. So that's number one. I want to kind of start with that human judgment is kind of comes into play when decisions need to be made. And when I say human judgment, I don't mean all five of us consultants sitting here. I think human judgment of people like Aditi said or Payal said, of their realities and of people we are making decisions for. So we might go extract all the information, come back with data, and then we throw it into an Excel and say, this is what is important and this is what the decision should be. I think that's where we will falter as consultants, as researchers, as program managers. So I want to start with that. When I say decisions, and I'm going to give an example of a very large scale sort of system that we built with a corporate, where they had 30 different NGO partners that they worked with, and we wanted to make a decision-making system. So earlier, what would happen is every NGO would write a proposal. It would go to the senior exec sitting in the CSR space, and then they would see, okay, how much money do we have? Who should get what? It became more complicated because it was not just partners. There were also geographies. So every different, wherever this corporate was operating, there was geographies. It became more complicated because there were different thematics. They had to support education, health. And then it became even more complicated because it also depends on the relationship they have with community, at what stage of functioning they are in that geography. So, well, they came to us and said that we need to build a system where, number one, every NGO is standardizing their data collection. AI helped us do that, right? So we built tools which were contextual. We gave them back to partners. We worked with them on the thematics. And we standardized the process as to how data is being given to us. And we built a very strong system which said, okay, if we have 10 crore INR rupees, which geographies, based on the business priority, based on the vulnerability need, should the money be divided as per geographies. depending on the proposals that we got with NGOs, it again gave it back to us that, okay, this is the need in the community. This is the NGO that could work there. This is why they should work there. And we had a beautiful, amazing looking system, which gave us all the answers. We cannot use that. As we realized, what we did then, we created layers of validation. When I say layers of validation, we went back to the CSR teams and said, this is what it looks like. And, there were so many things that the data, even though very rich, could not really, kind of bring that out. For example, but the government has told us to stop working here because they're coming up with a government scheme. But, there are lots of other NGOs or corporates who have been working there on education. So the need is actually for health. So what I'm trying to say here is, and then so these layers of CSR managers, community leadership, NGOs, our own understanding when we went for field, the decision making is not possible with AI. So maybe and Payal and me keep laughing and talking about, we have these two sets of a skeptic and someone who uses it a lot. I'm not a skeptic. But I know to what degree it, AI should be used, which is basically to synthesize information, not to make decisions. So that's one. Two, again, I come from the school of thought of participatory methods, and really something building on what Aditi said. How can I talk about someone else's reality or how someone else would like to be spoken of? And so for me, it's so important and probably tied very closely to decision making is validation. You cannot run with an Excel saying 90%, like what Aditi said, right? Like 90% would want legal aid. We cannot run with that assumption. And I think the more and more, I speak about this a lot, but the more we understand that our communities, the participants of our program, are not just there to give us answers to surveys. They are there to make sense of the data that we collect on them. And that there is no way AI replaces. And that's where human judgment, and when I say human judgment, again, I would like to point out, it's not about the consultants who are the humans here. It's about everybody who is working in the sector, in the space, who we are working with, who we are working for, needs to validate that information and help us make decisions. So I'll stop here. I have many more personal examples of why I wouldn't ever rely on AI, as Payal said, but maybe in the questions, and would love to hear questions from all of you as well. So thank you, Aivya, and thank you for having us here.
In organizational assessments and change management work, where can AI support the evaluation process, and where is human facilitation and judgment still critical?
Thanks, Aivya. Great question. So organizational assessments are a little bit different from the kind of programmatic assessments, that everyone else has been speaking about. But I think the same principles apply nonetheless. In this context, it requires, diagnosing an organization, like the organizational capabilities, functional capabilities, and even beyond that, like the organizational behavior that's really driving an organization from within. This itself is like a very soft kind of aspect. And, after these organizational assessments, you also need to prioritize, design solutions, craft a plan that's right size fit for the organization, along with driving change management and governing execution. I think AI can help in a lot of things. It's definitely a great enabler. It can help design questionnaires, cater to different stakeholders. It can aid in summarizing, conducting analysis, and even just kind of being a thought partner in a lot of ways. But creating a safe space for people to open up during interviews, reading between the lines, and even understanding power dynamics, within an organization are really critical to any organizational assessment. As an example, I always kick off every interview with, by setting the foundation and context by saying, I just want to let you know that this conversation is completely anonymous. All insights will show up in aggregate. So please be open, please be honest. At the end of the day, that's what will be best for the organization and ultimately the communities on the ground. And I think creating that safe space is just like such a critical component. And again, when they're speaking to a human, that also kind of humanizes everything. But by framing this, to be open and honest, it can also, easily lead to a venting session as well. about what's not going well and things like that. So it's also important, in my role in that context to, ensure it's a very solutions-oriented dialogue. I've found that so many challenges are known within the team, and even so many of the solutions are, known within the team as well, but they don't always have that safe space, that platform to speak openly, share their view on the way forward. And this requires significant human judgment and a lot of these other softer aspects. And as we kind of do the input gathering, kind of do that assessment as well, the next step is, of course, to problem solve on the way forward to kind of help. That's kind of the first step in organizational transformation. So working with leadership to say prioritize strategic initiatives, co-creating solutions with the team, driving alignment. This is all very critical. And this requires human intervention to facilitate, to drive buy-in, build motivation, and ultimately enable change management, which is like probably the most critical part of any such organizational transformation as well. Just to narrate like an example from a past experience, I'd done an organizational assessment and change management process for a very large, legacy, 40 plus year old organization. They had a head office with field teams, multiple programs, geographies across the country. And no doubt AI was a big enabler, helped me work efficiently, summarize reports, prepare questions, brainstorm solutions, etc. But there were definitely, critical shifts in the organization across strategy, structure, technology. There was even some dissonance between leadership team and the rest of the organization on certain issues. And as a third-party individual, I really had to serve as an unbiased, objective facilitator, and keeping the organization's kind of requirements and best interests at heart, no one single individual. And that required building bridges, across both sides, facilitating open dialogue, and ultimately co-creating solutions that was right-size fit for the context of the organization, their capacity, their culture, and many other softer aspects as well. And as always, we always go ahead with a plan for execution, but there will always be unknowns as well. And I often say that, humility and agility are essential for course correction. The humility to acknowledge that the plan was nice on paper, but not perfect in reality, and the agility to kind of course correct as required. So, in the same context, as we move forward with execution and organizational transformation, there was definitely certain course corrections required, pivots that needed to take place real time, and so forth. And this also required a very nuanced view of the organization and really coming down to some of the personalities from within as well. Refining things and, also just like being human through the process to acknowledge how we put the stick in the ground to move forward. But we always need to refine and evolve together based on, this humility, this agility, and so forth. And ultimately, I think this was equally important. It like kind of acknowledging that things weren't perfect from the get-go, but that we can kind of refine and build on things, from there. And ultimately, that also strengthened trust from the team. They weren't expecting perfection from day one. They knew that there's certain kind of kinks needed to be ironed out as well. And that kind of human component, I think, is what was key for, again, consistently kind of enabling that change management, and so forth. And ultimately, the organization was able to transform across many dimensions of the organization over the year. And the central ingredient was, again, human, the human component, human judgment. On the organization side, probably the most important kind of aspect was there, and then also on my side as a third party facilitator. So again, these softer aspects, are so critical, and just having that presence, that human presence, with the organization is so critical, even in the context of organizational assessments, organizational evaluations, change management, org transformation, and so forth.
Ivya, can I add something to what Rahul said? I think with a recent example of we were trying to figure out different competencies and do a competency assessment with the 35 people in our team. And, again, AI helped us build those tools. AI helped us identify what kind of skill sets we need, what should be the levels, who should be where. It really helped us build structure. And then we had this 360 assessment of everybody rating themselves, and then their managers, their peers, their juniors. And we had a great system. Everyone was scored, right? We had our numbers there. But I think the beauty of that entire system was people getting together and discussing the scores. Should it be higher? Should it be lower? And that really made a difference to how closely and collaboratively my team works together. Because while everyone had their numbers, I don't think that was what made my team confident, what had us all work towards a plan. It was actually human judgment as to why did you score me like that, or how can I get a better score. And that is exactly, human. I mean, AI can't replace the conversations, the interactions, the validation, like all of this. There is no way tech does. So just wanted to add that, because when Rahul said context and everything, everyone's organization has a different context. People are so different, just 35 people. But the beauty is now everyone can actually go back to that. And I've heard my team talk to each other that, oh, there was the literature review was something that we had to work on. Let's do a small learning session. AI is not going to do that. So sorry to be that skeptic again in an AI session, but I just had to add that. Sorry, over to you, Aivya.
Thanks for that, Sharon. This is actually the end of our first round of questions for our panelists. Just thought I could quickly summarize the pointers from our speakers. Payal talked a little bit about the incorporation of AI in tool building, and how when you're kind of doing pilots, it becomes very important to be on field and to understand context, to also incorporate ground realities and course correct, which obviously AI is not capable of doing. Next, Aditi spoke about how the data that AI is being trained on is not inherently representative of a lot of communities that we are essentially working for, and that obviously does not go well when you're kind of working with this data. Especially because it's focused on primarily English, institutional, and widely documented data, rather than experiences of, like she called it, people with lived experiences. Next, Sharon talked a little bit about how it's okay to use, AI is ideally to be used for synthesis and not for interpretation. I recall from one of our previous conversations how she mentioned that we kind of have a tendency to outsource data interpretation, which is not the right way to go about this, and I think that has really stayed with me. And I feel like AI is just programmed to simplify things rather than to be able to incorporate the various levels of complexities and layers that come with working with certain populations and communities. And last, Rahul spoke about how AI works and does not work well at the organizational level. I think it becomes very important to create those human spaces, and when you're and while AI is great at making plans on paper, when it comes to execution, I think it's very important for humans to be present for those discussions and make those judgments and decisions. I think we have a few questions from the audiences that we can quickly take before moving to our next round. Yeah, our first question is from Malati. She says, in a way, it measures work efficiency, but is it also measuring or monitoring performance of staff without their knowledge, especially with regard to data enumerators?
I mean, it's a lot of times for us also when we hire, we have internal enumerator teams, we have external teams as well that we hire project to project. But specifically in our training, we actually take everyone through, which questions will be audio recorded. Everyone knows that, there is like a time limit on Service CTO app, where for how much time have you spent on each question. So most people that we work with have used our systems before with us. And we also try and sort of, for every question, and especially things like consent, things like open-ended sort of questions where we need more qualitative responses, we do add a hint or do tell the enumerators that, this much time you have to spend, give the time to the respondent to, to think through. Don't need to run, don't need to run, like, doing 2 surveys less, but doing the one better, more in depth is more useful to us than just the number. So, going deeper into questions is important. So, so they know that, this is being used, I wouldn't say performance, but sort of used to ensure the data quality is in the way that we want. And if data quality is not coming in the way that we want, then we also have a data point, right? That, okay, you've spent only 30 seconds on this question. That's why the data quality is looking like that. If you ask like this, you'll get such a response. You could add a follow-up to what someone is saying. We can also hear the audio audit. So I think the teams also, at least now over these years, understand that all of this is to train and support them and not pinpoint in a way. So that's sort of what we do, at least with our data teams on the ground.
Mhm.
And, just to kind of add, I think data and monitoring in this context are always going to be relevant, in yesterday's world and in today's world and tomorrow's as well. So data monitoring I think this is just a way that is becoming more efficient. But then again, that course correction, that pivots, asking questions, that's again where that layer of human judgment will always be critical in a lot of ways as well.
I just want to add on this one. I think accountability, ethics, trust is passed on to our enumerators. So, when we go back and look at the data and say, hey, maybe you could get something else. Is there something we can support you with? So I don't think it's ever a judgment. And over the years, because we worked with most of these enumerators for so long, I think now we don't even need to go and tell them a couple of things, as to how questions should be asked. What are the ethics? What's the accountability? Why is data important? So I think it kind of, you build that capability and credibility over time, and it's important. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
With regard to international funded projects, we sign a non-disclosure agreement or accept TOR on right to privacy. By transferring such information, are we violating both ethically and policy-wise?
I would like a little bit more clarity on what information, because we would never upload any personal identifiers in any platform. That's rule number 1. Also, a lot of times, at least in my practice, Payal maybe, or Aditi, Rahul, you guys have a different way. But for me, I'm never uploading large data sets on any platform. It's usually kind of broken down into themes, into what kind of synthesis we want. And that's how our teams at Fourth Wheel are trained too. So it wouldn't be just uploading one large Excel sheet with personal identifiers, with location, with GPS and all of that. So that is how usually analysis is done, at least from our end. So there is no, again, even a lot of times when we are taking back data, like for example, if we've done an evaluation on a teacher training program, right? And then we are going back to teachers to say, okay, like 80% have said that there aren't enough teaching learning material, which restricts their work. We're not really going back and saying teachers from these schools or these locations or these profiles have said it. It's more a summary or a synthesis of what is being said. So both ways, you're never uploading your bulk of data, and you're never even taking back. It's all anonymized, and that's what we have consent for. Everything is very anonymized. Now we've become so cognizant of also like what kind of pictures we take in the field. Whether we try to avoid taking not just children's pictures. That suddenly becomes, maybe because me and Payal have both become moms, it's just become so a non-negotiable. You don't do that. But I think even now, even taking human pictures and using that has become, we don't use that. We never do that. So I hope this answers your question. But yeah, it's kind of an everyday work. Okay, that's what I could answer for this one.
So yeah, I think one of the things that we should especially do in these kinds of cases is have a connecting data set, which means you have all your identifiers, personally identifiable information in one data set. You have a connecting code sheet, and then you have the final anonymized data set that you put in. So I wouldn't strip the final data set of all details, like say if location is important to me, or a trend in location is important to me, and let's say I'm doing the study in Surat and Calcutta. Okay, so if I'm doing that, my code sheet would say Surat is location 1, Calcutta is location 2. And then when I put the final data set into the AI, it's going to have location 1, location 2, and then AI is going to respond to me saying, hey, these are the trends in location 1, these are the trends in location 2. But that way, I am not giving out personal identifiers so that a person can be tracked down. And this becomes especially important in the case of safeguarding, which someone's asked about here, where if you're dealing with very vulnerable populations, leakage of identity of a person that you had interviewed or had collected data from can lead to catastrophic consequences, and in these kinds of cases such a coded sheet really helps, because no data about the personal information goes out into the AI. And the second thing is also, now specifically coming to the safeguarding part, I think we can look up IOM's this project that they did about the counter trafficking data set has a lot of anti-trafficking survivor data, which is super sensitive, and they've come up with this concept of a synthetic data set, which is similar to the principle that I just explained. But in particular cases of safeguarding, maybe not so much at whistleblowing, but particular cases of safeguarding, a synthetic data set really helps to sidestep this landmine.
Thanks for your input, Aditi. Moving on to the next question. Curious about several aspects of AI use in this space and would love to hear the panelists' thoughts. One, if we are uploading respondent data into an AI tool for analysis, are we obligated to include this in the survey consent conversation? Second, are development sector organizations creating policies around the use of AI internally and externally? And third, how are we thinking about the labor practices used for AI training, data annotation, climate, environmental impact?
One of the things that I could sort of see is, we have, a more of a basic data policy, but we are also internally developing an AI policy which sort of adds as to what AI to use at what point in time, how to use it and all. So it's a development in process for us that we are. And even for us, even for me, when I'm talking to different, especially NGOs and all, I think this discussion is very much there. I don't know how much of an output of a policy is there yet, but I think a lot of people are thinking of, both sides of things where, who uses, it's also a matter of data privacy. It's also a matter of hitting these data limits on AI tools. It's getting also expensive if you keep using it for everything. So even having that understanding in the team that, okay, if I do X on an AI tool, it will sort of say decrease my time by 10 hours on some part of the process in the project. But if I keep doing it for everything, using these tools are also expensive. So you have to internally identify where it's reducing your workload and where it's like doesn't make monetary or data privacy sense as well. But I think there is definitely, we're not too far from getting a lot of organizations make these policies and make these processes in the organization itself. Yeah, just wanted to talk about that point from these three.
Yeah, and just to kind of build on Payal's points, I think if, as and when you all start creating your own AI policies and so forth, I would also just be very very intentional about where and what AI can do, for the organization, but also what it should not do as well. Because again, this whole conversation has been about human judgment. I think one can usually kind of tell when it's just a copy and paste output from AI and so forth. And that could actually have negative implications. Maybe it is more efficient, but quality could suffer in certain ways and so forth. So I think that's just one recommendation for anyone that's looking at this, whether it's in proper AI policy or even just kind of guidelines on how to use AI. Again, what it can do and what it should do, but also what it should not do. That's equally as important as well.
Yeah, I just have a different take on this for everyone attending, and it's a powerful room because we have 110 people here. If for all, and a lot of the questions, I think my response is like how when you go for a training to understand monitoring and evaluation, you learn how to make a theory of change, you learn how to make tools, you learn how to do analysis. I think AI is now front and center on capacity building. We need to build capacities of ourselves and of our teams and invest in building that capacity, because it's great to say, and I completely agree with Rahul and Payal that there are some things you can't do. I've been really, telling the team, first you do it yourself. You got to run that mile. You got to learn yourself. You got to have your own perspective, your own experience, and then you do AI. You don't start on day one of your job on AI. But I think the responsibility also lies with us as leaders, as managers, as program teams, as funders, to be investing in building the capability of humans to make judgment. Right? So it doesn't come with a checklist of what AI can and cannot do. It needs its own space, its own course, its own capacity building platforms. And so I think a lot of the training programs Fourth Wheel will now do will have, it never had a component of how and when to use AI. It had theory of change, tools, analysis, reporting. AI is a very important component. So uh, all of this, and again, it's a budding field, right? I think I started using this I started using AI in 2021, and I learn something every day. And, maybe every 2 days I'm calling Payal and saying, I love it, I hate it. I love it, I hate it. But you're learning, right? So just wanted to add that, like, capacity building is so important. Rather than expecting everybody to know everything, that's not possible. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
So just wanted to add one thing we were discussing in our team meet a few weeks back. Because I think now, even in report writing, a lot of things start looking similar because people are, using similar sort of backends on the AI and all. And I remember Sharon and someone in the team mentioning, because we have at least like 6-8 people in our team who are maybe 6 months, 1 year experience into, the sector, and they're just starting out. And a lot of us were sort of mentioning that, how will you as a emerging young professional in the M&E sector have your own voice, have your way? How do you develop your way of writing if ChatGPT is writing for you? So, it's okay to sort of maybe make your sort of structure a little better and make your English a little better if, that's the help you need. But if you are not able to build your voice in the first few years of your career, it's never going to get built. You'll always be dependent on ChatGPT. And we were just mentioning that when we started Fourth Wheel 15, 16 years back, I don't even think there was Google Drive for us to sort of work together on one platform. We were making things on a Word document, sending it to each other, editing, sending it back, sending to our client. They were writing comments and giving. So there was so much back and forth. And I think in this process also, like, the understanding and what the other person wants, how can you make it better, was so much more than now just sort of dropping it and rewriting it and it all looks the same. So that is an important point, especially for people who are starting in this age of AI, their careers.
Sorry, I just have one more. So, a very interesting comment here, and maybe it's a good response, is Shraddha's question here. Are there any tips on how to train AI models? I think the question is, are there any tips to train humans to ensure that their judgment precedes AI synthesis? So I think we should flip it around. Yes, I think, Sanjita, like, the focus should be on training humans, and obviously AI, let the text do that, let them do their job. I think as people in the social development space, as consultants, as evaluators, as program leads, as funders, the focus should be on how do we focus on humans to make better judgment, to have their own voice, as against training the AI, because eventually it's us who are training the AI. It's us who are kind of, having our own sense of thought, ethics, accountability, context, and all of that. And that will train a better AI. So I love the question here. I I like the comment here, Shraddha, but I think let's flip it, if you ask me. Maybe you don't agree.
One practical sort of aspect of what Shraddha is asking, not to sort of directly analyze the data, but one thing we've developed is, because, for say a project, we are talking to say 5 different stakeholders, for example. You are also talking to multiple people because you want to triangulate the data that you are collecting, right? So a couple of times it has happened that, tool one team member has made, tool 2, the second team member has made, and they've not sort of looked at each other's stakeholders as much as we hope everyone does. But that has sort of led to, someone asking, say for one aspect, someone asking age as a specific number, someone else asking age as a range from say 20-30 or whatever. And even the way you're asking education, there are certain demographics that you want to sort of talk about. The way you are, say, if you have a Likert question on certain aspects of the project, you are asking someone a 1 to 10 Likert and some other stakeholder 1 to 5 Likert. So these things we have sort of internally developed a skill on Claude, where we put in like our 4 or 5 tools that we've developed, and we run our triangulation sort of test on it. And then the output sort of says that, okay, these two questions in these 3 stakeholders are not matching. So then this considerably reduces our time to sort of keep matching every question. So it's basically a trained skill, and the more we do, the more it sort of learns about our projects and how we triangulate what aspects are important. So if we just add like the 4 tools in a folder, run this triangulation skill, it gives us an Excel output that these questions are not triangulating how it should be. So that's one practical thing that we use for not analyzing data, but in a way the data comes in.
We've come a long way from just paper and pencil, kind of data collection. Now everything is digitized and so forth. So that was, I think, one leap, in terms of evaluations and data collections and so forth. And, I think now every tech-enabled platform, data collection tool, et cetera, I'm sure that all of these developers are thinking about how AI can be, utilized on their platforms in different ways. And then I think it's also equally as important, for the community as users of these now AI-enabled tools to, provide that kind of user feedback from our side to, challenge in the best spirit, demand, kind of, again, as consumer of these platforms to be able to just ensure that it's always steering in the right direction, whether it's in terms of the capabilities, whether it's in terms of ethics, and otherwise as well. So I think that's just one small call to action, for all of us on this webinar as well.
Can I answer? I know you're going step by step, but I have one very interesting example of what we've done. So no process, and we've tried to do that, maybe not as well. But for example, one of the biggest issues Payal and me, who run a consulting firm, faced was standardization of reports. And I see here there's a question on, AI report generator, ethical reflexivity. And so this was a huge problem for us for many years. If Payal and me designed a certain report or a presentation, we could never get people to do it in that standardized way. So we started using Gamma. Very simple, sounds very easy. But even then, when our team started using Gamma, you could clearly tell the difference between a Gamma created by someone with 1 year experience, a Gamma created by someone with 4, a Gamma created by someone with 10 plus years of experience. So what we have now ensured the team does is, we don't accept any presentations made in Gamma. We have taught them to ensure it is converted to a Google Doc. It is edited by them. You have your footer, all of that is manual, because that's the only way that our teams can build the skill. So I would say we have a 60-40% of AI usage, even in something as simple as Gamma. And that is so important, because tomorrow, if Gamma just stops working, and I keep asking my teams this, what are you going to do if Claude stops working tomorrow? And sometimes they've said, oh no, we just went and had chai for half an hour, right? That's not the world we want to be living in. And I keep asking them, if I tell you to make a presentation on Google Docs, will you be able to do a simple, like just move things around? And they're like, nahi, wo to seekhna padega. Sorry for those of you, but we have to learn that. So I think it's also very important for us to say, use it to get to a certain standard, but you have to work manually and know the certain skills of writing your own report, making a presentation on Google Docs, using Excel, like just everything we did 10 years ago. Still, you need to know that skill for AI to work for you. And I think that's something that we focus a lot on. Like, you use everything to make it better, but then I'm going to come and ask you questions, because you need to know that skill, and that's what makes AI better, or that's what makes human judgment better. We just wanted to add one example. As Payal said, we use it for triangulation, and sorry, I'm going to stop here, but Payal and me, we at least once a week, we realize something the team can't do or, struggles with to standardize things. So we don't go and say, use Claude and, everything's going to be standardized. What we do is we try to identify the skill to what level it can be standardized. But then we also teach them how to use the softwares, the basic skills that you need to know as an evaluator or as a researcher. So it has to always be a combination of both. And I'm going to stop.
I think before we take any more questions, let's just quickly get to our rapid fire round. So I'm just going to shoot a question to our entire panel and you guys can feel free to answer. So the question is, as AI becomes more integrated into evaluation, what is one thing that should always remain front and center in evaluation practice?
I can go ahead and respond first, again, in the context of org transformation. I think, AI is a huge enabler, but it cannot build trust. It cannot facilitate buy-in or enable change management. It also can't help course correct and pivot in real time when required. And it cannot replace that humility, which is so important in change management.
I can go next. So I think consultation and validation with people who have experience of the problems we're trying to solve. I think this is something that should always stay front and center with humans, not with AI.
Sort of one is similar to what Aditi said, but like review and validation step, I think is very, very important. Like no matter how much AI is there in the different workflows that are there, someone in the team from different kinds of team also, like, consulting team, partner teams, on-field teams, has to sort of look at the output and, check against what they are sort of looking at. The field team will have a different perspective. The internal M&E team, the external consultant will have. So all of this has to sort of, all of them have to sort of look at the output, check against, what the program and the context is, and really say, does it really match the reality on the ground or not? I think that's a non-negotiable step before we sort of implement anything.
Yes, I have a line, but the purpose of evaluation is not analysis. The purpose of evaluation is better decisions. And decisions require human judgment, accountability, values, and context. And so you can have the best of tools, but if you don't have human judgment, context, and accountability, and like Rahul and everybody on the panel said, building that trust, no AI, no tech can really do that.
Thanks, Sharon. I think we can take a couple more questions. If current AI systems primarily rely on probabilistic pattern recognition trained on existing data, how capable are they of engaging in dialectical or critical reasoning that identifies contradictions, power imbalances, and marginalized perspectives which may be absent from dominant data sets? I think Aditi might want to take this.
Yeah, I'd love to take this question. So I think it's so important that we're thinking about this question at all, right? Firstly. Secondly, I think there are a few different ways to kind of go about this. AI can still probably only take us to like 60-70% of where we want to go. The 40% has to be our judgment. AI can't solve for everything. But some of the good practices that we could follow here is something that's used a lot in medical research, right? They do something called a subgroup analysis. So you have your large research question or evaluation question, but then you have smaller questions that you are trying out in a very disaggregated form with certain sections of the population. So we can potentially try to do that in our data sets, whether it's a public data set we're using or primary data that we've collected. If we do that mindfully, saying that, let's say we're doing something where we know that one particular population is from a tribal area that's been historically suppressed, underrepresented. We can say that even if we've received just 10 responses from this particular population, can you tell me what the results look like for this population as compared to the entire data set, right? So we're at least drawing our attention to that one subgroup to start with. And the second thing that we can potentially do here is using the agentic AI model, right? So we if there are any Friends fans here, Ross Geller had done this long back when he'd said that, we can download our thoughts into a machine and then live forever, right? So something similar to that, where basically we create the agent, and we create the agent in a way where we say that here are the 10 biases I think you're going to encounter when you look at this data set. So it's like a checklist of biases and questions that we want to counter question the AI on. So whenever you're looking at a data set, put that into that agentic AI mode so that the agent is running through every single bias that you've identified, and it's running through every single question that you think AI needs to ask in that data set. Like, do you think you've underrepresented people from this area, or you've underweighed responses of people from this area, right? So it's almost like downloading what we think, downloading what people with lived experience think into that agent, and then forcing AI to kind of respond to those questions. I think if we do both of these, we might still get to, like, maybe instead of 60%, we might get to like 75% of where we want to be. The remaining 25% has to be humans doing it.
Sharon, would you like to respond to that? Okay. All right.
I like 100% agree with Aditi. Nothing to say. Agreed.
All right. Our next question is, when defining success metrics for a complex multi-stakeholder community development project, why is human judgment is indispensable?
I can go. I think I can see a lot of people who know me, who I have dialogued with, but it's just that story, right? Like, we go into a construction site thinking that water and sanitation is the biggest problem. We come back and realize that fumigation and cleanliness is what their biggest problem is. So that, I mean, I have a longer story to it, but honestly, this is the best answer, right? We can't, like, lived reality is what Aditi said. We can't go in with a certain perspective. If you actually go and ask ChatGPT or whatever other bot you use right now, what are the biggest problems of construction workers? Even if you go in Gujarat to a site in Surat or a site in, Panchmahal in a tribal district, it is so different as to what their issues would be. And so you can't rely on AI for that. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
And I think similarly, whether it's kind of an output that's coming out of from AI or some top-down kind of approach, dictated by, say, a funder or, elsewhere, you just can't go in with those kind of assumptions and so forth. The bottom-up perspectives, perspectives of multiple stakeholders are always going to be key. And again, when, to the question of when defining success metrics, for multi-stakeholder kind of engagements, like, again, that's where that buy-in and facilitation also is required. You can't alienate any one kind of stakeholder in a multi-stakeholder, kind of project or engagement.
When you use AI for planning and evaluation, and when the prompts are well planned, the evaluation protocol output is good. How to better the protocol with greater human-centered face to the design?
When you're building a theory of change, or when you're building a program design, in our experience, most times if you go and ask leadership what are the objectives of your skill training program, they have a very different opinion than if you go and ask the manager, and then if you go and ask the implementation teams, and if you go and ask the community. Example, go and ask the leadership, they say, oh, we want to increase their income. They should be earning at least 20,000 rupees per day from this, per month from this training program. You go and ask managers, they will tell you, oh, they need to be, at least I need 80% of placement. You go and ask implementation teams, and they will say, we need them to get jobs in their nearby communities because they are so close to the ground. You go and ask women who have gone through the training program, they will say, we get independence from, we become more independent, we can be more outgoing, and that's my outcome. You go and ask males, and they say, we get jobs. What I'm trying to say here is, different perspectives are so important, not just to get perspective, but also for different stakeholders to understand different perspectives. So, when the leadership understands that women are actually talking a lot about independence, they will start thinking from we need to do more exposure visits for them. When managers realize that boys are trying, or implementation team wants more jobs in their vicinity, they start thinking like that. So when you are trying to plan an evaluation or an evaluation outcome, etc., it is very important for human voice, not just to get data and say, okay, these should be our objectives, but also for different people to see different perspectives. So again, AI can probably synthesize all of this, but it can't go do it can't make the discussions happen. It can't make that sharing happen. And again, you can't go to GPT and say what should be the objectives of this program. Even if your prompts are, based on a lot of research, like Aditi said, where is that research coming from? And is it contextual? I don't know. So, yeah.
I'll probably add on one point to this. So building completely on what Sharon said, how do we then take this into consideration, these various perspectives? One actionable step that could potentially be taken, and I speak from a place of doing, in addition to smaller evaluations, doing very large evaluations where there's budget and time for this, having a small advisory committee right at the start of planning and evaluation, which is multi-stakeholder and represents different power groups, different types of stakeholders. So like have an implementation partner on board who actually works close to the communities, have 2 or 3 different well stratified community members in the group, have a decision maker on the funder side. So that kind of an advisory committee, we've kind of tried that model in a few of our evaluations, and it has really helped, because that then goes into, when you first prepare that first draft of your evaluation protocol, take it to this committee, tell them to tear it apart, and then see where, you're missing perspectives. So if you have the time, the budget, please do think of something like this for your evaluations.
Thanks for responding, Sharon and Aditi. Before we move on to the rest of the questions, and since we are nearing the end of the webinar, just want to quickly launch a poll to get the audience's feedback, and post that if you guys want to stay, we'll be taking the rest of the questions. Also, in the meantime, just wanted to talk a little bit about our next webinar, which is happening on 5th June. It's titled From Tools to Systems, Rethinking AI Use in Evaluation. The session explores how evaluation can move beyond fragmented task-based use of AI towards integrated system-level approaches. It will also examine how AI-enabled platforms, connected data systems, automated workflows, and real-time analysis can strengthen evaluation processes, improve continuous data use, and support faster, more informed decision-making in the social sector. It's happening this Friday, June 5th at 2 p.m. So please do join us. Juhi will be sharing the link in the chat box. So please do register. All right, I think we can start taking the rest of the questions. Our next question is from Kiran, who says, what are the implications of the DPDP Act on use of AI, especially in case of evaluation?
I could take some of this. I've been sort of going over the act, but a couple of things that I have sort of understood from the act is one, I think earlier also someone mentioned that, in the consent form, we should start adding that this data will be used on AI for analysis, for different, whatever aspects you are looking at. The act also says that the data should only be used for the stated purpose. Like if the data is being collected for one particular type of evaluation, you can't put that data to say train some other AI for whatever reasons. Like if you are trying to train AI for a particular thing, that should either be mentioned in the consent or with your funder or internally. We need to sort of flag these things, because the act says that you've taken it for one project evaluation. This is what you use the data from. You can't keep using it for other things like teaching the AI. The other part, I think it says that we have to, as much possible, reduce the personal identifiers. A lot of data is collected with, say, full names, Aadhaar numbers, a lot of these things. So that definitely needs to reduce that's what the act says. And the AI part here is that you can't be dumping all this data on AI. I think earlier we did mention that you have to remove these, code it, whichever way it is. If it's really important for the program to say have the full name, have Aadhaar for certain reasons, these need to be sort of taken out when you're sort of dropping these things in AI. And overall, I think the act also specifically talks a lot about children's safeguarding. Because if we are taking data from kids for education projects and all, so there I think again, like dropping data from what they are doing, their pictures, all the aspects, anything which is child related, we need to sort of be a little more cognizant of what the act says and where AI comes in. So yeah, just sort of preempt. I think the act anyways is sort of talks about a lot of things, and we have to preempt where AI is being used or not, and it has to come, like it can't be an afterthought. You have to sort of start thinking about this during the inception phases, say, of the projects, and sort of put it out there that this is how it's going to be used. And I think we all owe it back to the respondents community to tell that a lot of times we are still taking a lot of data, not going back with our synthesis to the communities. They are a lot of times it's just extractive and not sort of giving them what really what has come out of the study. So I think it's also important from evaluators, from data collector side, to start mentioning how the data is being used, and if where it is going, who's using it. You're not training other AIs for this. So those things I think sort of lag from the act for sure.
Thanks for answering, Payal. All right, I think we have taken all the questions. Any closing thoughts from the speakers?
I'd just like to say, everyone thinks that AI just makes life easier, and if you have AI, then you become better at your job. I honestly, having worked in the space for not too long, but for long enough, there is a clear, like someone also mentioned, they were asked to write some letters and it all looked the same. Honestly, AI is not going to do a good job for you unless you are good at your job. So I just want to end with that. AI it can facilitate something, but you can't have the best report if you don't know how to do your job well. So I just want to end with that. And I've seen that repeatedly. You can tell a good report from a good consultant and a bad report from a bad consultant, even though they have used the same tool. So just want to end with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. I think with that, we can end today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And we hope to see you in our final webinar happening on 5th June, titled From Tools to Systems, Rethinking AI Use and Evaluation. Also want to thank everyone again for sharing their feedback, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.